Hi everyone, my name is Lauren Whitlock. I'm here to share with you Professionals Make It Work, supporting communication. Thank you guys so much for being such amazing, multitasking, master of all things, kick butt ninjas. We would not survive without the amazing dedication that you guys all bring to work every day that you come in. So during this presentation, we're hoping that you will understand what AAC stands for and how we support communication, honor and respect the communication needs of our students, and know what their rights for communication are. We also hope that you will leave knowing the roles and responsibilities of a communication partner and understanding the need to create communication opportunities throughout the day. We also hope that you will gain some understanding of the prompt hierarchy that we use and how it will help maximize the independence of our communicators. AAC, not ah! So I understand that AAC just looks scary when you first encounter it, especially when you see some of our more high-tech devices with lots of buttons, and it can be very overwhelming. But don't worry, working with an AAC user doesn't really have to be scary. If you think about their communication system as a foreign language, it may become a little more manageable for you. We always all want to be bilingual, right? So AAC stands for Augmentative and Alternative Communication. Augmentative communication is really used when you're verbally able to communicate, but perhaps that your communication abilities aren't quite um, understandable. We have those kids who really need to supplement their communication using some visuals or a voice output system. Alternative communication is used when you're unable to communicate, and these communication systems do stand as your only voice. So why does AAC matter? Well, it enables a student to communicate for lots of different purposes. We often see kids who are able to request their foods, their breaks, their preferences, but are really unable to communicate any other needs or demonstrate social interaction. And so we're going to take a look at some of the reasons and the ways that we can communicate. So we all communicate to share information. This can be commenting on a friend's piece of clothing, giving an answer to questions that teachers ask, also being able to express your emotions and say that you're feeling frustrated or really happy. This is where we find students being able to name or label items, express their ideas, express their opinions, and definitely express their preferences. We also all communicate to express our wants and needs. This can include requests, asking questions, and expressing information about anything. We can look for actions and help requests, being able to request different people. Also, very important, being able to protest or reject. As much as we don't like it, we really do need to teach our students how to say no and how to say that they're not interested in what we're trying to do. We also need to make sure that our students are able to indicate discomfort. I think we've all experienced those students who are experiencing some sort of discomfort but are really not able to communicate, which then leads to increased behaviors. We also communicate to show social etiquette. This includes using manners, expressing appreciation for things like how wonderful you guys are, and being able to say hi and say goodbye. And this includes using words that are appropriate for their age. So it's not very typical that we would see a teenager say goodbye. It may be something like peace out or see you later. So keep that in mind as we're communicating with our students. Finally, we communicate to create social closeness. We communicate to tell stories, tell jokes, to converse. Being able to tell what happened last weekend, or being able to imagine a story and then share it with others. These are all important things in addition to just having and maintaining a conversation. So one of the big things to remember is that our students using AAC, whether we are comfortable with it or not, do have it listed in their IEPs, which means that it is required for us to have our students having access to it all the time. There are so many times where I see students who I know have communication devices that are without them, and it's so important not to deny them their voice. They have a right to communicate everywhere that we do. So all people use a variety of strategies to communicate throughout the day. We don't all just verbally speak. Some of us use our hands to gesture. Thankfully for you guys, mine are hidden underneath of the video screen, so you're not seeing how much I talk with them. We text, we email, we make phone calls. We use our facial expressions to communicate. It's our responsibility to make sure that our students who are nonverbal or use AAC to support their communication always have it available. In addition to their primary form that they use, we need to have other alternatives available. This means having a low-tech alternative if they're using a high-tech device. If they use a low-tech, maybe it means having a high-tech as a backup. They could have a board around their school, various places at playgrounds, next to exits, anywhere around the school that our students are going to be. It would be nice to have some sort of communication available to them. So communication alternatives come in a variety of forms. You see here we have some low-tech pictures in a book. We have a little pocket talk for those emergency things that you may need to say. Here's a communication system that's similar to PECS, using lots of different vocabulary. And we have a playground board. I'm so excited to see the playground boards that are going to start popping up around Hanover County. We have eye gaze boards, Big Macs. This is actually a communication board that's on a pool kickboard. So when those AAC users who use high-tech systems can't get them wet, they have communication when they're still enjoying regular activities. We have some little badge tags that just have communication to be able to support our students. Some things to remember. While we talk about AAC being the acronym for Augmentative and Alternative Communication, in your brains, I would love it if you could keep it in mind that AAC also stands for Always Available Communication. Just as a reminder that our students need to have their voices with them all the time. Next, we're going to talk about some of the roles and responsibilities of our communication partnership. As you work with students using our AAC, it's really important that you keep in mind that they should have the same opportunities to communicate as our verbal students do. This is such an amazing opportunity for you guys because you are the ones that spend so much time with them. You are their partners, you are their supports, and you are absolutely the ones that are going to keep them going day by day. I love this quote. All people with a disability of any extent or severity have a basic right to affect through communication the conditions of their existence. Beyond this right, there is a number of specific communication rights that should be ensured in all daily interactions and interventions involving persons who have severe disabilities. And there's actually a communication bill of rights, and you may have seen this around some of your classrooms, but we're going to break it down and kind of talk about some of the things that we see in that communication bill of rights. So this Bill of Rights was created in 1992, revised again in 2016. And one of the big things that I need everybody to remember is that just because someone can't speak doesn't mean that they don't have anything to say. And also that just because they can't speak does not mean that they can't listen. So please be aware of the things that you're saying around our students who are nonverbal, because they are hearing and they are listening. So some of the rights that we have for students with communication difficulties are that they have the right to be with their own friends and have their own social life. So this really brings home the fact that we need to be including our students with their peers and allowing them to engage in those conversations with friends. They have the right to ask for what and who they want and where they want to go. Just because we don't want them to ask for those things does not mean that we should deny them the right to have the ability to ask for those things. Um, Again, they also always have the right to say no. Doesn't mean that no is the end all be all, but they're allowed to say no, just like any student or adult is allowed to say no. They have the right to say what they feel, which is why we take a lot of time in making sure that our students have feelings pages or access to feeling vocabulary throughout their day to help us guide them in knowing the emotions that they're experiencing, as well as for them to be able to tell us how they feel. They can make their own real choices. We want them to be able to see the things that are available and ask for them. They may not get them, that may not be an appropriate thing at that time, but they do need the ability to ask for it. They also have the right to say what they think, which is why many vocabulary systems have lots of words, and the best systems are the ones that do allow students to say what they want, when they want, wherever they want. Some other rights for students is that they have the right to ask for, get, and give information. They have the right to know about the people in their life and the things that are happening to them. So we need to make sure that if we have to help them or assist them with something, that we're telling them what we're doing while we're doing it. They need to be taught what to communicate and how to ask or express the things that they need. Excuse me. Students have the right to have their communication system and any of the other tools that they use to support them to, first of all, be working properly, and to be with them and work with people who know how to set them up, use them, fix them, or at least know how to contact if things aren't working right. I kind of touched on this before, but our students have the right to be heard and answered, even if they can't have what they want. It is okay to say no to our students if they ask for something that they may not have at this point. They have the right to be a part of their community. Most importantly, they have the right to be treated with respect and the right to be talked to and not about. So please be aware of the conversations that you're having in the classroom, that if you are discussing how a child is progressing with a teacher, make sure that you're using positive language and not talking about the student, but encourage them to be a part of it. And talk with them in a way that they may understand. Make sure that you're talking to teenagers as you would speak to other typically developing teenagers. They are not infants, they are teenagers. So we need to make sure that we are speaking with our students in a way that is appropriate and respectful for their age. So in order for our students to be successful AAC users, they need to have supportive communication partners. And that simply means that the person who is talking to them is considered their communication partner. Super important for our AAC users, because we really need to be talking to them in a way that they are going to be speaking back to us. So a supportive communication partner for an AAC user presumes potential and speaks to the AAC user in a way that supports those communication rights that we just went over. Presuming potential simply means that we believe that our students, given the right tools, have the potential to express themselves just as anybody else would. We also need to make sure that as communication partners, we are recognizing and acknowledging all communication attempts that our students are making, even if it's not necessarily in a way that is the way that we're targeting. For example, if we have a student using a high-tech communication program on an iPad and they sign more if they want some more food or some more water or something, we're not going to make them say it again on their iPad. We're going to recognize the fact that they communicated more and move along with our conversation. It's not necessary to make a child repeat themselves because they didn't use the system that we were hoping that they would use. We also need to make sure that we are persistent with our students, that we don't give up when it takes them a long time to answer, that we're patient, giving them plenty of time to process, respond, and even to come up with those things is going to take them much longer because it's a whole different way of communicating. We need to be consistent. We have to use communication daily. We need to use it in every single environment, and we always have to remember to have alternatives with our students at all times. We also need to make sure that as communication partners, we are engaging and interacting, that we're providing some real motivating things and reasons to communicate. The 5-year-old is not going to want to talk about the weather. They're going to want to talk about toys or TV or shows that they love. We need to make sure that we're providing topics and prompts and things that are going to be age appropriate for the students that we are speaking to. Being a communication partner is no easy task. It is almost having you rethink the way that you have ever communicated with students who have communication difficulties. And it is going to require a lot of practice before you feel comfortable doing that. And that is perfectly okay. So AAC, I like to think of as a foreign language. When you think about foreign languages, you really must be immersed in that language. You need to have lots of practice using it. You need to hear people speaking it to you so you can figure out the patterns and the words. For AAC, we need to speak AAC to our students if we are going to expect them to speak AAC to us. So the best way to become a foreign language speaker is to really have that practice. So we will support our students by building our own skills. We're going to use their AAC to share our own thoughts and ideas. We are going to be speaking it with them all the time. Everything that you have to say to that student needs to be spoken through their communication system. So we often have the misperception that when a student has an AAC device, that they are automatically going to be able to use it to know where things are and to become proficient in a relatively short amount of time. Unfortunately, it may take months or years in order for our AAC users to really use their communication systems in an emerging way or even in an effective way. I like the thought that just because you have a piano doesn't make you a musician. AAC, just because you have a system doesn't mean you're going to be an expert with it. I like to kind of bring up the thought of a newborn baby. Most parents will talk to their baby from the nanosecond that they are born, and they continue talking to them and continue talking, and they don't expect the baby to respond. We just talk to them because we know that's what we're supposed to do. And many children will learn their language this way. Unfortunately, some do not. And so we have to think about alternate language systems. But again, using them the same way, we're going to have to talk to them for years possibly with no expectation of a response. So this video that I'm going to show you has a little bit of that thought all pulled together for you. Our third part is talking about creating communication opportunities. To successfully support our AAC users, we need to try to have as many opportunities to communicate as we can throughout their day. Ideally, there should be about 100 planned structured language opportunities per day. What that means is that thinking about all the different times that they may have a chance to be able to communicate. This could be when they're coming in from the bus, when they're coming into the classroom, when they're saying hello to their friends, making lunch choices, participating in a morning meeting. They're all different times that you can kind of have noted down of when they might be able to communicate, and that helps you to be aware of when you may need to support the students. Just a little thought here, 100 planned opportunities does sound like a lot, but it's really only 15 opportunities during a school day, each hour. So you guys have the inside scoop. Since you are attending classes with our students and you're the one who is going to lunch with them and helping them throughout their day, you're going to know the kinds of things that our students are going to need in order to have their communication supported. You guys really are the pulse on these students that you can help report back to the teachers and the speech language pathologists and say, hey, we're in drama today and our assignment is to have a little presentation. And that's where your teachers and your SLPs are going to be able to say, all right, this is how we're going to handle this task. But you guys are truly our resources in this. So looking into communication opportunities a little more thoroughly, we want to make sure that we're recognizing these opportunities. They can be having someone say hello to the student and having our students answer back if they're not at a spontaneous point. We can make sure that we can engineer times where the student knows when they're going to be answering a question in class. It can be something as simple as having them say bless you after somebody sneezes, asking for items that they need, being able to comment on books or videos, or commenting on the colors of people's shirts or the flowers, whatever it may be. Opportunities are all around us, and we just need to be on the lookout for when they may occur. Great communication partners have to learn how to sometimes create opportunities that may seem a little out of the ordinary, but it's the way that we can make sure we can force a communication opportunity to have. We do have to be careful that we're not negatively reinforcing some communication skills, but doing so in creating opportunities that help support communication as well as self-advocacy. You could have items missing during an activity. So if they need scissors to cut with, as you're working through the activity, you can say, all right, now it's time to cut, and just stop and see if our students recognize that they're missing something, and then that provides that opportunity to say, hey, I need some scissors. You could keep things out of view. You can keep them in view, but out of reach. My favorite thing is giving really teeny tiny portions. We try to avoid using food, of course, but if you're joining students at lunch, you can give them a small bit and then have them request. One of the cautions I did want to say about food is really trying to make sure that that's a one-time communication opportunity. We don't typically withhold food from our regular students when they're eating lunch, so we don't need to be making our students ask for every little morsel that they're going to eat. Also great things that if you know that they want something but they're not communicating what it is that they want, hand them something that you know they don't want. If you know that they want the bouncy ball, hand them a box of tissues, and maybe that will help to prompt them to say, no, or you then request the item that they do want. So, classroom communication, as you guys find yourselves going into the general ed curriculum with our students who have communication difficulties, difficulties, we still need to make sure that our students are having communication opportunities in those classrooms. You will find that you're going to be looking for vocabulary that may or may not be in their communication systems. And one of the ways that we can go about doing that is learning to provide opportunities for them to communicate what they need to and to communicate what they know using the words that they already have in their communication systems. So, for example, we need to start thinking about how we change the way that we ask questions. Instead of asking general things like, what is this called? Or who fights fires? Or where does the king live? With questions that ask for specific vocabulary names or labels, let's try to ask some questions that allow our students to really describe things or to be able to say things using their vocabulary that they have. So I've got several resource pages in the slideshow following, starting here and the next couple. I'm not going to go over every single thing, but we wanted to make sure that you guys had lots of ideas of ways that you can take topics and things that are going on in the classrooms and really be able to help support. And you guys are going to be able to help coach the teachers too, to say, hey, you know, instead of asking the question of what is going to give that specific vocabulary name, these are some questions that my student has available to communicate, and these are ones that will be great. So, you can ask, what did Goldilocks do at the beginning of the story? Instead of saying, where did she go? You can say, what did she do? And she went on a walk. Instead of saying Bear's house, which may or may not be in that communication system, most systems are going to have go, most of them are going to have on, and most of them are going to have walk. You can talk about Anne Frank and talking about how she's feeling, because again, those feelings are going to be built into communication systems as well. Instead of saying, where did Anne have to hide, and eliciting that word attic, we can say that she was in a small, dark, quiet place. So again, it's non-specific vocabulary, but it's actually using a higher level of thinking, and you will be amazed at what some of our students can do. Lots of words in math and science that our students can use to talk about whether, instead of adding and subtracting, you can, use those words. Is this number more or is this number less? Rather than saying, what's the biggest planet, you can have them describe that planet instead, using words like near, far, cold. Even in electives, you can have some great questions, such as, tell me something distinctive about Van Gogh. They can say, cut his ear off. Instead of saying who cut his ear off or what famous artist cut his ear off, you kind of just change that questioning around to a way that really supports our students. Even in the vocabulary of our social free time, asking for help at lunchtime, repairing that question, what do you need? We inevitably always need something. Somebody's forgotten something at lunch, and they need to have help, which is a great way to encourage those words. Here's some more looking at some science stuff. When the teacher, you're watching a video and they're asking about a specific thing that you saw in the movie, you can ask them to describe it rather than to label it. Still showing knowledge of what they watched, it's just coming about in a different way. So there are going to be those content vocabulary words, such as rotation. And I apologize, I'm working at a middle school, so I hear a lot of these words. But we can still use the vocabulary words in our students' systems. So when you rotate, it's essentially turning and going around. So our students can say, or our teachers can describe it, and our paraprofessionals, you guys can describe it as turning and going around. And then as students are being assessed on their vocabulary, they've been exposed to the content word. You guys have explained that vocabulary using the words that are in their system. And then as they are being assessed on the content vocabulary, the expectation is that they use their words that are available to them. So as an example, instead of saying, what does Earth do on its axis, which is rotate, you could change the question, or the teachers can change the questions of what happens when the Earth rotates. And again, we're pulling in that it turns. My biggest caution is not to get caught in that yes and no trap. It's so simple in our minds to just ask yes and no questions, because yes and no are that it's that 50-50 choice. It's that easy choice. It's the easy way out. But what we don't really consider is that yes and no questions are actually very, very difficult. And there are two kinds of yes and no questions. We have yes and no questions about preferences, but then we also have yes and no questions about information. And students are easier able to give yes and no questions about preferences than they are about actual information pieces. So it may be more appropriate to say, do you want the goldfish crackers, yes or no, than it would be to say, is this a goldfish? Because again, that comes into learning a little bit more about the vocabulary of things than it is about what their personal drive is for. So prompts. I'm sure you guys have all seen a variety of prompt hierarchies, especially if you're working with students with autism or who have some other developmental disabilities. And the prompts that I'm going to show you and the prompt hierarchy that I'm going to show you, these are very specific for AAC. Because we think about things just as slightly different than we would as if we were giving prompts for something else. So please be aware that there is a difference in these hierarchies from ones that you may see otherwise, but that this one that I'm talking about is purely for AAC. So we are going to have to prompt some of our students. Many of them are new users to their AAC system. And so we have to make sure that we're giving time for a response. We need to make sure that we are asking our questions and giving that 10, maybe 15 seconds worth of wait time before we move to pointing where something is or having them have that physical assistance to get the response that we are hoping that they get. So here's a great little video on just some prompt compliance and just a nice little bit of humor for us here.
Samuel, please go into the kitchen for dinner.
No, I'm not eating. Your cooking is horrible.
Samuel, go into the kitchen.
No, I'm not going.
I will help you into the kitchen.
Oh, all right. I'm going.
Thank you for going into the kitchen. Samuel, please go into the kitchen for dinner.
No, I'm not eating your horrid cooking.
Go into the kitchen this instant.
No, I'm feeling ill just thinking about your cooking.
Get up. Go into the kitchen. Get up, Samuel. Get up. Fine, just lie there.
All right, so the prompt hierarchy that we use for AAC begins with an expectant pause, and this is a requirement for any communication opportunity that you have with your students. Even if we know that they may not respond spontaneously, it is our jobs to provide them that opportunity for a spontaneous response. That's part of respecting communication rights. After that expectant pause, there are a variety of different levels that we can work through. This is something that we really need to work together as a team with your classroom teacher as well as the speech language pathologist, because they'll be able to provide you some more insight as to where the student is on that prompt hierarchy. So just breaking down each little step so you have a brief understanding. Count to 10 or 15 seconds while you are giving that pause. It doesn't seem like a long time, but when you're having to process where items are in your communication system, and even if it just takes you longer to process the information in the question, we need to make sure that we're giving our students adequate time to come up with their response. Best thing to do is keep your mouth closed while you're doing this, because we really over prompt by starting that verbal communication. The next level is that indirect nonverbal prompt, and I think these two pictures sum up anything that I could ever say. If you can make faces like that, you have mastered the indirect nonverbal prompt. If a child doesn't respond after that sort of questioning, like, I don't know, what are we supposed to do? We move on to the indirect verbal prompt. So we're going to start using some verbal language here and saying, now what? What do we need to do? Like, what's the next step? If you're encouraging that, what should we do when we see people and wanting them to say hi? Those are some of those verbal instructions. Remember that you're going to give one of these and wait. After that, if they have not responded, one of the things that you could do is request that response. Let them know that you are waiting for them to say something to you. If you know that they want you to push the button to make the toy move, then you need to tell them, hey, tell me what to do. Again, pausing afterwards and giving them time to respond. After that, you're going to use those gestural cues. And for us with the AAC, the gestural cue is going to be very brief, pointing to the symbol and not talking. It is purely just that point. After that, we can look towards that partial verbal prompt. So we're going to give part of the response and let them fill in that last piece. Then we will have the direct model, and this is modeling what you want them to say. I go out, I need help, whatever it may be. Please make sure that you're pausing and waiting for them to respond. Finally, the last step that I hope that nobody ever really has to use is using physical assistance. And this is one of the big things that we want to make sure that we're very aware of, is that we're talking about communication. And by using physical assistance to make a student say what we want them to say, we are forcing something that is not ours to force. If you have to do it, if you have that relationship and your SLP has said, he really just needs you to have that proximity. He will do it by himself if you just hold his wrist. If you have that knowledge, then you may use this sparingly. But we don't want to make the children feel like they are being forced to communicate something that they don't want. This goes back to their communication rights. This goes back to presuming potential. If they don't want to cut with scissors, they're not going to request the scissors. So be very aware that physical assistance is really not something that we want to do very regularly at all. So tying it all together, I know this has been a lot of information. I want to point out to you guys right now that I'm always available for help. You're more than welcome to email myself, Jennifer Dickerson, Becky Conti. As the AT squad, I encourage you to reach out to your SLPs in your school buildings. Everybody is here to help support you guys, because you guys are always there to support us. As a new to AAC person, or if you're hearing this information, maybe not for the first time, but maybe for the second time, or really haven't been exposed to this, I'm sure there are so many things and so many questions that may be rolling around in your brain. When we think about the vocabulary and the common thing when I talk about the descriptive questioning is, well, why can't we just put all the vocabulary in there? Wouldn't that just be easier for them to have that? You know, Looking at students not being able to understand materials and why we can't just sit in the class and really not participate. Um, One of the things that um, talking about bringing that AAC wherever you go, um, just because they're going to PE doesn't mean that they don't need their words to communicate in PE. And yes, it may appear that I've absolutely lost my marbles and that this is too much for you to be able to handle, but I promise you that's not the case. As far as why we're not putting vocabulary words for every single unit, for every single thing, is because it is very time consuming. And if we can teach our students to use the words that they have, that they're going to use all the time in lots of different situations, it's going to be far better for them than it would be to have one word that they may use for one unit of their school career and then never use again. Um, as far as not participating in the classrooms, we do have students who are unable to communicate, but really are absorbing all the information. We have to presume potential. I think my favorite example is that a student that I worked with who actually uses her eyes to communicate with a system was in a teen living course, and she needed to be able to pass the safety test. And so we created a book about the safety requirements. And then when we assessed her, giving her her choices on her AAC system, she got every single question correct. She had only been in the class for a little bit, but we gave her the information that she needed, and she absolutely was able to show us that she knew what we were talking about. Um, just as far as that PE class goes, there's never been a silent PE class that I've been to. There's never been anywhere that nobody has been forbidden to speak. And when we have our AAC users and they don't have a way to communicate, we are essentially stripping them of their right to be able to communicate. So keep in mind, always available communication. And guys, this is a daunting task, to be asked to really be invested in a child's communication system. But I have absolute faith and confidence in you guys that you are going to be the best communication partners your students may ever have. You are an incredible group of people, and your dedication shines through all of the things that you do. So please believe in yourselves as we believe in you, and be the best that you already are. You've got this. And I just, again, wanted to say thank you for everything that you do each and every day, for showing up to work even when you've had bad days before. And you guys help those students who have many disabilities, but especially the ones with the communication ones, to feel included and to be a part of the group. And I appreciate that very much. Thank you again, and I hope you have a wonderful day.